Exactly, Anthony. You're understanding it correctly. Look at cancer, for instance. The voltage in the cells drops as the fats are destroying the cell membranes, and the DNA becomes damaged in the cells. Now, there's some other things that come into play on this issue, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. When the DNA is damaged in the cells, they lose their instructions to die off properly, and they continue to multiply out of control as cancer cells do. Now, so basically what's happening here is the body needs these electron-rich unsaturated fats. And when they processed these fats for the grocery store shelves to keep them from going rancid, they killed the electrons in these fats. They chemically chemically and then heated them, and you've killed them off. So you don't have the electron-rich fats, and your cells can't fire without this type of fat, if that makes sense. Also, another issue Dr. Budwig talked about is the brain, as bad fats affect the cells in the brain. Now, I did some further research and found that these fats, when heated to high temperatures, like in barbecue, can cause the buildup of a polyacrylamide. And it appears the bad fats and the polyacrylamide affect not only the cells of the brain, but the neurotransmitters. So the neurotransmitters need this electron-rich, unsaturated oil to transmit properly for the production of your serotonins and your dopamines and much more. Now, I've also read that the neurotransmitters are made up of 50% omega-3 oils. This issue of the lack of electron-rich oils and the wrong oils that we consume in our bodies daily, which Dr. Budwig is speaking of, in my opinion, is destroying the human body. And I hope what she's saying makes some sense to everyone. And that's why it's so important to get the electron-rich, unsaturated fats back into the body, back into the cells, back into the cell membranes, back into your tissues, so the body can start the repair process if it's not been damaged too badly. And so this is the issue. The other fats are getting in there in place of these electron-rich fats, and it's destroying us. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense there, because it's kind of a tough area with her. Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Budwig also said that without the proper metabolism of fats in our bodies, every vital function and every organ is affected. And this includes the generation of new life and new cells. Now, our bodies, Anthony, they produce over 500 million new cells every day. Some people say it produces as many as 10 billion cells. I don't know what the figure is. I've seen so many. But Dr. Budwig points out that in growing new cells, there is a dipolarity between the electrically positive nucleus and the electrically negative cell membrane with its high unsaturated fatty acids. And during cell division, the cell and the new daughter cell must contain enough electron-rich fatty acids in the cell surface area to divide off completely from the old cell. Now, Anthony, when this process is interrupted, the body begins to die. So, in essence, these commercially processed fats and oils are shutting down the electrical field of the cells, which are in turn allowing chronic and terminal diseases to take hold of our body.
Now, Mike, what cooking oil do you use if the others, as you put it, are liquid plastic in a bottle?
Well, that's kind of how I look at them, as liquid plastic in a bottle. But probably Dr. Mercola has said it best. Use coconut oil. It's a medium-chain triglyceride, which your body can easily metabolize. And if you want more information on this, you can simply go into www.mercola.com, and Mercola is spelled Mercola. And just do a search for his research on coconut oil. You'll be absolutely amazed at the benefits of coconut oil. I use it every day. Now, I want to point out something here on this coconut oil, because there's some information that's not correct out there. And people say, oh my God, coconut oil, that's a saturated fat. Saturated fats kill you. Well, half truth. Yes, saturated fats kill you, but not coconut oil. Coconut oil is a plant-based medium-chain triglyceride, and your body can actually metabolize coconut oil quite well. And not only that, you can use the coconut oil on your hair, you can use it on your skin and your face, and it's a great moisturizer. Mm-hmm. And if it were true, Anthony, about coconut oil, there wouldn't be a Polynesian left alive in the world anywhere. So again, that's a wives' tale, and I believe that was used to sell margarine and those type of products which actually ended up causing a tremendous amount of deaths throughout the world.
Now, Mike, going back to the firing of our cells that you were just talking about, what happens when these new daughter cells during cell division don't break away from the mother cell?
Then, Anthony, you're in serious trouble. And this is how the formation of tumors start. Now, Dr. Budwig explained how tumors form as follows, and then I'll try to clarify it after her quote. So what exactly happens with this issue of tumors. Now, bear with me as this is a little complicated, and I'll explain it out in a couple minutes so everyone will understand, because that's extremely important what you've just asked. And Dr. Budwig noted the formation of tumors usually happens as follows. In those body areas that normally host many growth processes, such as in the skin and membranes, the glandular organs, for example, the liver and the pancreas, or the glands in the stomach or intestinal tract, it is here that the growth processes are brought to a standstill because the dipolarity is missing due to the lack of electron-rich, highly unsaturated fat. The course of growth is disturbed, and the surface active fats are not present. And the substance becomes inactive before the maturing and the shedding process ever takes place, which results in the formation of tumors.
Now, Mike, can you explain that in a little easier version so everyone could understand that?
Yes, I will, because I know that's a mouthful, but there are those out there, Anthony, that want that type of an explanation. But to explain this cell division, or what's going on here, as I see it, as I look at it, is that you have a mother cell and you have a daughter cell, and they're sitting there side by side. The daughter cell came out of the mother cell, and they're attached by a fatty lipoid membrane. Now, every day you get about 500 million of these new cells coming in like that, and some say as many as 10 billion waiting to come in. So these cells, they fire electrically, Anthony, and they fire between minus 70 and minus 90 millivolts DC. That's about where they fire. And that's determined by the electrical potential difference between the inside of the cell membrane and the outside of the cell membrane. It's the electrical potential difference. But over time, as we get older or we take in certain foods that we shouldn't, certain toxins, certain fats and oils and so on, the electrical charge gets knocked down in these cells, and it drops minus 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. And you'll know just about where you're at. When you hit minus 50 in your own body, you can feel it. You don't have the get up and go like you used to have. You feel like you're kind of lethargic, like you're kind of dragging. You may have some body aches. You may have some headaches. When you hit minus 30, you're going to have some chronic or terminal disease. So what Dr. Budwig is trying to say here is taking place is she's taking flax oil, which is negatively charged. Again, it's always about positive and negatives, it seems to me. Now, the body's electric, so that makes sense. So anyway, she's taking flax oil, which is negatively charged. She's put it in the cottage cheese, which has sulfur protein in it. And that's positively charged. So she's putting a negative into a positive. And then when you blend it together, it actually creates an electrical charge. And when she does this, the flax oil is now no longer an oil. It becomes water soluble. Okay, when you combine the two together, it becomes water soluble. It creates an electrical charge. And when you eat that, it fires every cell in your entire body. So what she's saying about these tumors forming is simply that in these high growth areas that she mentioned, these cells, this mother and daughter cell, are not breaking apart from each other. The voltage becomes too low, and you're not getting the electron-rich fats in. You're getting the hamburger fats in or the French fry fats in there, and it's suffocating the charge in the cell. It's coming over the top of that cell like a cloud and knocking the electrical charge down in there. And so the voltage gets too low, and the daughter cell cannot break away from the mother. Many times, they won't even come out and break away from each other. And then in that area where you have this low voltage, these toxins build up, and it forms a tumor. And so this is how you get a tumor. All these free radicals, and the cells don't have enough of a charge to repel these free radicals and these toxins. And this is how you get a tumor in your body. So then when you take this cottage cheese and flaxseed oil into your body and it starts firing all the cells in your body, it brings the charge up into the cells, and the daughter cell will break away from the mother cell and come in firing good and strong. And Dr. Budwig says that is your immune system. She says everything else is secondary that you put in your body, and that so many people do not understand that your immune system is these electron-rich unsaturated fats combined in a sulfur protein that fire these cells, and the cells break apart, and you've got a good, strong firing cell. But in when it comes to a tumor, there's not enough of these fats in there, and that tumor forms. And that tumor is your best friend, Anthony, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. It holds all the toxins in one place. So when you take these oils in the flaxseed oil and cottage cheese, then again, the oil comes into the cells, even to the cells that are surrounding that tumor, and they come into that and then and gets absorbed in there, and then it causes the tumor to start to break up. Many say the body will go ahead and dissolve the tumor. Some say the cells will mature on out and die. And so, anyway, the tumors will break up. So the way to work with tumors is what she is saying, is to get the electron-rich fats back into the tumors. You don't want to be going in there, and she'll be talking about it in a minute, when it comes to sticking needles in it and causing it to leak everywhere, or hitting it with chemo or radiation. She said that's not the way to do this. So this is what she's getting at. So anyway, on Dr. Budwig, now, her thoughts are as follows on this, and hopefully what I've said makes some sense because it's a little bit complicated. She says that the formation of tumors can be reversed by providing the simple foods cottage cheese and flax oil, which revises the stagnated growth. And this naturally causes the tumor or tumors to dissolve. And the whole range of symptoms which indicated a dead battery are cured. Now, this is what Dr. Budwig said in the translation, which I read. Now, Dr. Budwig did not believe in the use of growth-inhibiting treatments such as chemotherapy or radiation. She was quoted, Anthony, as saying, "I flat declare that the usual hospital treatments of today, in a case of tumorous growth, most certainly leads to worsening of the disease, and in healthy people quickly causes cancer." And anyway, I think that's a very interesting what she had to say there. And I want to point something out here on this, and this is important to people with these tumors. And I had a good friend of mine who passed away years ago from lung cancer, gave me an example of the doctor's view on this. But Greg had lung cancer, and he went in and got checked. They found out he had a lung tumor. And so what they told Greg was that we're going to need to do chemotherapy. We get about a 67% response rate when we do chemotherapy on these lung tumors. And then Greg will have to follow up with radiation, and then we get roughly another 13%. So overall, Greg, we get about an 80% response rate with these lung tumors. And Greg said at the time, he thought, well, that's great, basically sign me up. And so they brought Greg in, and they put the port in Greg on a Friday. And then his wife, Gwen, was in the chiropractor's office either Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, and she saw a book written by Dr. Ralph Moss, which was called Questioning Chemotherapy. And so she brought that book home. The doctor let her bring that home, and it just happened to be that Greg was going in Monday to start his chemotherapy. Well, Greg saw the book, and he started reading what Dr. Moss had written, and it blew him away. And when he was telling me this story, he said, I went in, I told my wife, I can't believe what just happened to me. He said that I found out by reading this book that response rate means nothing. He goes, it's survival rate that you want to know about. And he goes, my survival rate was less than 1%. And my quality of life was going to be absolutely terrible if I went through those treatments. So I had a 1% survival rate. But yet, he goes, it was a play on words that they referred to as response rate. So I'd urge everybody to watch yourself when they're talking to you, so you understand that response rate. So the tumor shrinks 10%, so it shrinks 30%. That doesn't make any difference. It's when the cancer metastasizes out and spreads, that's what usually kills a person. And so in Greg's case, he went back to the doctor Monday, and he brought the book in there, and he showed it right to the doctor because Greg told me this. And he said, well, he goes, I told you response rate. And Greg said, you led me to believe that was survival. And, of course, they had their big argument, and Greg said, take the port out. And Greg refused. to do the chemo, and the port was removed. The doctor told him he'd be dead in 6 months, and Greg went with some alternative treatments that not medical treatments, but alternative, and Greg lived another 3.5 years. So one's got to watch this on these tumors and the way the information is being received. So watch yourself. Response rate is not survival rate. Now, another area, too, I want to bring up here on these tumors, and I want to mention this, is these needle biopsies of tumors and what happens. If you stick a needle in a tumor, okay, and many times they'll stick these tumors multiple times, you are going to cause that tumor to leak inside of you. There's no way that it's not going to leak. And not only that, when you pull that needle back out of that tumor and you pull it back through that tissue, you've just seeded the entire area in there. So one wants to think about whether or not one wants to go through those biopsies, those needle biopsies. And there was an excellent case of this. Recently I was visiting with a lady, and she had gotten diagnosed with breast cancer. She had 2 areas on her right breast, and so they wanted to do the biopsies, and she said she was hesitant on it because she just didn't feel good about it, and she went ahead and let them do it. And she said when she went home that evening, she hurt so bad she couldn't believe it. And she said that, as she's telling me the story, she said that I could feel it fizzing inside me like Alka-Seltzer. And she said that when I laid there that evening on my side, I could feel it running inside of me. And my eyes must have got a big round of silver dollars. And she goes, Mike, you don't even have to say it. And I go, no, I'm not. You already know what happened. And so anyway, remember, those tumors are holding those toxins into one area. And if you release those toxins everywhere, that could be a real issue. So one may want to watch out on that. Now, there's another area, too, here that I thought was interesting, just happened to me recently, and that was with my dog. And I have a Great Pyrenees who has a large bulge in his right leg, and I took him to the vet, and he was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a cancer tumor in his leg. And a x-ray revealed that it's eating into his bone and that his breathing is not smooth. And she felt like that possibly the cancer had already moved up into his lungs. So the first thing that she wanted to do was do a needle biopsy. And I just looked at her, and this just happened within the last week and a half. And I told her, I said, there'll be no needle biopsies of this dog. I go, you will release that cancer everywhere, and we're not going to do that. And she kind of looked at me funny, and I just told her that I was part of a cancer research foundation, so that was out of the question. And she said, well, the rest of the protocol is amputation of the dog's leg and then chemo and radiation. Now, this was a young doctor. She hadn't been at it but maybe a couple years. And I just looked at her, and I said, it's pretty pathetic that in the last 50 or 60 years, you guys don't have anything other than wanting to cut my dog's leg off, do biopsies, and spread this cancer, and give him chemotherapy and radiation. And I said, that's just not going to happen with my dog. So I put my dog on the alternative treatments that we're going to be talking through during the recording of this CD.
Well, that's terrible that, all they can think of is to cut off your dog's leg, and amputate. What did she say when you told her that?
Well, she looked at me and she goes, I know what you're saying, and I understand it, but that's the protocol. Now, one good thing about this was that when I returned to pick up my dog, I brought her some information, which I'm sharing here today, so she could learn something new to help others. And I also gave her the Cancer Tutor website, which is, of course, is cancertutor.com, Tutor, cancertutor.com. We must educate these doctors to start thinking outside the box, and that way they can start demanding change in this barbaric cancer system of theirs. Now, when I was researching Dr. Budwig's work, I found testimonials of people from around the world that had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, all types of cancer, and they were sent home to die, and they were now actually in remission and living healthy, normal lives. And I get questions all the time sent to me, emailed to me. I've got this type of cancer. I've got that type of cancer. And with Dr. Budwig's protocol, it was used as best as I can tell. I couldn't find any cancer that it wasn't used on. And in many, many cases, it had amazing results. So Now, Anthony, Dr. Budwig not only used this protocol for treating cancer in Germany, but other chronic diseases such as arthritis, arterial sclerosis, heart infarction, irregular heartbeat, psoriasis, eczema, and other skin diseases. And she used it in immune deficiency syndromes, and multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune diseases. Diabetes works extremely well with diabetes. Lungs and respiratory conditions, I've seen it work very well with those. Stomach ulcers, again, very well. Liver, prostate, strokes, brain tumors, and for strengthening brain activity. And she also used it in many other chronic diseases, so it wasn't just those. From what I've seen with this protocol, this flaxseed oil and cottage cheese, it is extremely effective in just about any disease that you can think of. And in her book, it said Dr. Budwig's protocol had proven successful where orthodox traditional medicine had been failing so badly. And by what I've seen, Anthony, I believe it. It's been amazing, some of the things. Scleroderma, it was amazing what happened when using that protocol. A guy used that protocol with scleroderma, and what I saw, what he told me he did. So it was very interesting. Now, Dr. Budwig mentioned also this strengthening of the brain, and I believe that not only could her protocol impact MS, but possibly ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's disease, and Alzheimer's disease. I believe they could be significantly impacted with her protocol. But I believe the greatest impact would be starting the protocol early into the disease. So if a person has an issue and they can't figure out what it is, and they've been to the doctor, why not simply eat flaxseed oil and cottage cheese and see if that doesn't start to alleviate that issue? And you'd be surprised what this is capable of doing once you get those electron-rich fats into that body so those cells can start firing. So Dr. Budwig also stated in her book, and of course that was a long time ago, some of this information, but you learn from the past and then bring it forward to the present. And she made a quote in her book, and it said, "A Swede has proved that no brain function can take place at all without threefold unsaturated fats." And she went on to say, without any doubt, every function of the brain, and this has been scientifically proved, needs the very easy activation effect of threefold unsaturated fats. And she went on to say that the same applies for nerve functions and for the regeneration and within the muscle after strenuous muscle activity in the so-called, what she referred to as the oxidative recovery phase during sleep. And this process requires the highly unsaturated, particularly electron-rich fatty acids in flax oil. And then she said that, so when I wish to help a very sick patient, I must give the most optimal oil I have. My opinion is flaxseed oil. Now, Dr. Budwig further stated in her book, and this again goes back many years ago, what we need in Europe today, in Germany, as well as in Switzerland, America, and France, what we really need are electron-rich, highly unsaturated fats. Now, bear with me for a minute, and this will make sense. She went on to say that the moment two unsaturated double links occur together in a fatty acid chain, the effects are multiplied, and in the highly unsaturated fats, the so-called linoleic acids, there's generated a field of electrons, a variable electrical charge, which can be quickly conducted off into the body, thus causing the recharging of the living substance, especially of the brain and nerves.
It sounds almost like sticking your finger in a light socket and getting recharged electrically.
I'll tell you, Anthony, I agree with that, and that's a good analogy, but that would really hurt. I think, Anthony, a better way to put it is when you mix the oil and cottage cheese together, is creating a charge for the body, like you would hooking a battery charger up to a battery. But this is a very powerful nutritional recharging of the body. In fact, those with respiratory issues will find this very interesting. Dr. Budwig said that it is exactly those highly unsaturated fatty acids which play a decisive role in the respiratory functioning of the body. And she went on to say that without these fatty acids, the enzymes in the breath cannot function, and we asphyxiate. even when given extra oxygen, for example, in hospitals. And she said that lack of these highly unsaturated fatty acids paralyzes many vital functions, and that it primarily cuts off the air we breathe. And she said, we cannot survive without air and food, and we cannot survive without these fatty acids. And this was proven long ago. Now, she mentioned not only the shutting down of the respiratory function, but the lack of these fats in the glands of the body, in the brain, as I mentioned earlier, in scholastic performance of children. Many times when they get these fats back into these children, they'll improve a grade or two, according to Dr. Budwig. Also, the function of the heart, proper firing of the heart. She mentioned marital infertility, that these people can't conceive a baby. And once they go on that flaxseed oil and cottage cheese, she said usually within 30 days, the lady was getting pregnant. She talked about a lack of these fats and oils in the brain for moral behavior problems, human sexual relationships, cell division, which we talked about. The cells can't break off from each other if you don't have these electron-rich fats. Again, we talked about formation of tumors. And she also noted the ingestion of wrong fats, which cause humans to eat 6 times the normal amount of food. Now, I believe this, where she talked about people eat 6 times more than normal amount of food. When you look at some of these buffets and you look at the people that are in there, and you, again, back in the shopping centers, out there on the street, and you look at the obesity out there, and this is being caused strictly, according to her, because they don't have the electron-rich fats in the foods that they're eating. And so they're eating the foods that's got the canolas in it, that's got the vegetable oils in it, and thus their body's starving to death because they don't have the proper oils to fire their cells and all the tissues in their body. And that's requiring more food, and they can't get enough. And I believe that's what takes place there.
You know, it appears that the bad fats are just tearing the human body up. But it appears to me that the Budwig protocol appears to be a very, very powerful protocol, and it sounds as if it could benefit just about anybody suffering from a chronic or terminal disease. I'm amazed, personally, more people don't know about this.
I totally agree with you on that. In fact, Dr. Budwig pointed out that she often took very sick cancer patients from the hospital with only hours or a few days left to live, and had very good results with her protocol most of the time. Now, I would have to assume that some of those patients she worked with were just too badly damaged by chemotherapy and radiation. She also pointed out that in some of these patients, she would start their therapy with an enema of 500 cc's of an oil mixture, and that their subjective awareness of well-being increased immediately when they were given this enema of this oil. And she said that many could not urinate, they could not produce bowel movements, or when coughing were unable to bring up mucus. But once the protocol was initiated, this started reactivation of the vital functions, and the patients began to feel better.
Now, do you have the details of what the oil mixture consisted of, which she used in these enemas?
Well, I know that the oil mixture is called LD oils, and LD is ELDI, LD oils. And they can be purchased from Germany from a Wolfgang Blaching. And his email address is Wolfgang, WOLFGANG, .Blaching, BLOCHING, at, and then the small letter T, like in Tom, and then hyphen, online, dot, D, such as in David, and E as in Edward. And that's his email address. And a person can order that through him by just emailing him over in Germany. I'm pretty sure, Anthony, that 2 of the oils that this LD oil contains are flax oil and wheat germ oil, and I don't know the rest. It's pretty well held in a secret. Now, people I know here, because of the cost of a bottle of this oil, which is around $100, and the time it takes to get it from Germany, are using flax oil in the enemas instead, and have had pretty good luck with it. Now, many will use a cup or 2 of the flax oil in a retention enema. The flax oil should be at room temperature, so you may have to take it out of the refrigerator and let it warm up. And then when you do the enema, you want to try to retain it for a period of 10 to 15 minutes so that it can be absorbed into the body through the blood vessels of the rectum. And again, I want to point out here that the rectal enema with the flax oil was used for the very sick, and she had very, very good luck with it. Dr. Budwig also used this LD oil application twice daily, in the morning and the evening. She would rub the LD oil R, she called it LD oil R, into the skin over the whole body, and a bit more intensively on the shoulders, the armpits, breast, and groin, where the lymphatic vessels are, and also on the problem areas. For instance, the breast, the stomach, the liver, wherever the issue may be, pancreas area. And she'd leave the oil on the skin for about 10 to 15 minutes and just cover the person from top to bottom. And people are also using flax oil in place of the LD oils on this. And some have used a 70-30 flax oil, wheat germ oil combination. Some have just used the straight flax oil. I've got the wheat germ combination off of Wolfgang when I emailed him, and he wrote me back that sometimes he thought it was a 70-30 or a 60-40 type combination would work on that. But again, I guess you could just use the flax oil if you had nothing else. And then once you put this oil on for 15 to 20 minutes, you want to be careful. You don't want to get that on anything, and you don't want to slip and fall. And then after that 15 or 20 minute period, Dr. Beddoe would have them take a warm shower without soap. And then she'd follow up with another shower, and this time using a mild soap. And then she'd have that person rest for 15 or 20 minutes. Now, the purpose of the shower, after the body had been oiled and before you use the soap, was to allow that warm water to open up the pores so that oil can penetrate a bit deeper into the skin. And then, of course, that second shower with the soap is for skin surface cleaning so that the clothes and the linen will not become soiled too much.
So it appears to me that she was trying to get as much of this electron-rich oil into the body as possible by applying it both internally and externally. I mean, as if she was trying to fire the entire body, wasn't she?
I'd absolutely agree with you on that. I definitely believe that. She was hitting it from the outside and the inside, and very, very smart lady. Dr. Bedwig even went further, and in her book, she brought up the relationship between the fat syndrome, electrons, photons, and solar energy provided by the sun. And she pointed out that the sun is an inexhaustible source of energy and an element of life that affects the vital functions of the body. Now, Dr. Budwig found that when she treated patients and had them lie in the sun, she noticed they started feeling much better and that they became rejuvenated. And she referred to the sun, Anthony, as having a stimulating effect on the secretions of the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the bladder, and salivary glands. Now, Dr. Bedwig mentioned that doctors tell patients and cancer patients to avoid the sun as they can't tolerate it, and that is correct. And she says that once these patients start on her oil protein nutritional advice for about 2 or 3 days, which means they've been getting sufficient amounts of the essential fats into their body, into their organs, into their tissues, then they can tolerate the sun very well. And she said the patients then tell her how much better they feel as their vitality and their vigor is restimulated. Now, the last of the points mentioned by Dr. Budwig, and maybe the most important, is the electrons in our food serve as resonant system for the sun's energy and are truly the element of life. And she said that man acts as an antenna for the sun, and the interplay between the photons in the sunbeams, and photons are the smallest particles of sunlight. So she says the interplay between the photons in the sunbeams and the electrons in the seed oils and our live foods governs all the vital functions of the body. So, it's pretty heavy thinking on this, and it just amazes me.
Yeah. Mike, if you think about the creation of man, when God created man and back in the Garden of Eden days where everything was natural, the food was plants and all that stuff, and then to think about where we are now and to look at what we eat now every day and to think about how far off track that we've gotten since then. When I think of what I eat, it's no wonder that we're all coming down with these chronic and terminal diseases.
I definitely agree with you on that, Anthony. We're all guilty of this, and some of us are better able to handle this than others, and some of us definitely have a stronger genetic makeup. But in many cases, I believe when that makeup's not strong enough, then when your body just gets far enough out of kilter, then your genetics are going to carry you in the direction of the disease that you come down with.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you've done an excellent job today in explaining the science behind this protocol and Dr. Budwig's research. Can you further explain how you would combine the ingredients in this protocol?
Yes, I can. The Budwig protocol, try to use only flax oil from the refrigerated section of your health food store. Now, never use capsules, flakes, or flax oil from the shelves. Sometimes you might not have a choice on that flax oil from the shelf, but if you don't have to use it, try to get it from the refrigerated section. Always check the expiration date on that flax oil. You'll find an expiration date on it. And it must be refrigerated. And again, I said check that expiration date. Make sure it's not expired. Mm-hmm. So when if you get that off of a shelf and it's not expired, you be sure once you open it up that you go ahead and refrigerate that. Now, I would not use the high ligand flax oil because the taste is not clean and you cannot tell if it's rancid or not. They have left the husk from the processing of the flax seeds in the bottom of the bottle. Mm-hmm. And so it leaves less product. Mm-hmm. And you want good, clean tasting oil, and you don't want any flavoring added as they're doing with some of these flax oils. I've seen them putting lemon in there. I've seen them putting different flavorings in there, and you don't want to do that. Dr. Budwig just used organic flax oil, or what some refer to as flaxseed oil. Now, the mixing ratio is simply 2 tablespoons of 1 or 2% low-fat organic cottage cheese. If you can get that organic, I would use it to avoid the growth hormones and pesticides and so on. Mm-hmm. But if you can't, then you're not going to have any choice. But usually I'm finding people that are using the 2% low-fat organic cottage cheese, and usually it's 2 tablespoons of that cottage cheese to 1 tablespoon of the oil. It's always a 2-to-1 mixture. So you want to mix only the amount that you're consuming at one time, mm-hmm. so it's mixed fresh each and every time. And one example of this would be to mix like 4 tablespoons of cottage cheese to 2 tablespoons of the flax oil. And then a person could consume that twice daily or more, depending on the severity of the health condition one's attempting to address. Mm-hmm. Now, one should probably start slowly with this oil, and maybe just once a day, and work their way up, letting the body adjust to this protocol. The oil and the cottage cheese must be thoroughly mixed at a low speed, using an immersion blender, blending until a creamy texture with no standing oil is achieved. And the mixture should then be immediately consumed. Now, 2 very good brands, Anthony, of these oils are mm-hmm. of these flax oils are Barlean's has a good brand, and Spectrum has a good brand. So now Barlean's has a program here in the United States, and I don't know whether that extends worldwide or not, but they have a program here in the United States for cancer patients where they can buy the flax oil directly from them at a substantial discount. And I think it might even be like a 30%. But that's if you're a cancer patient, and you may have to provide documentation that you are. But their phone number for this program, the last I heard, the phone number is 800-445-3529. But either one of these oils will work. Again, leave alone the high ligand. Mm-hmm. Look on the front of that bottle, and leave alone any that's had any flavorings added to them. Now, as far as mixing goes, many will say, Mike, how do you mix this? What do you use? And I recommend that they use the immersion, a stick or wand-like mixer for the flax oil and cottage cheese when you blend that together. And I would try to get one that has a low speed and a high speed, but use the low speed. Don't use the high speed. Mm-hmm. There's some talk about whether that messes up the electrical charge that's created when you go to a high speed on that. So be careful about that. Now, one may also want to consider sprinkling a tablespoon or 2 of freshly ground flaxseed over the top of the freshly mixed flax oil and cottage cheese. So you can buy whole flaxseed. There's 2 types out there. There's a brown and there's a golden. Mm-hmm. Most of the people seem to go to that brown, but if it's not available, go to the golden. It'll work just as fine. And buy it whole, and then just take a tablespoon or 2 and put it in a little coffee grinder and grind it up, and then you can put that in by hand on top of the flax oil and cottage cheese that you mix together in the blender. Don't blend the flaxseed into the oil and cottage cheese with a blender. Just mix that in by hand. Now this supercharges the protocol. It makes it even hit those cells harder and hit that entire body much harder. So it's a good idea that to use that flaxseed. And again, to grind up the flaxseed, one can use a small coffee bean grinder. Do not buy pre-ground flaxseed, as the flaxseed goes rancid about 15 minutes after you're grinding. Wow. So if when you see a pre-ground in there, you go, oh, well, I'll just buy a bag of that and use it. It's no good. So buy it whole and grind it yourself. And as I said before, you can use brown or golden. Either one will work. And anyway, and then keep the regular seeds in your refrigerator, and just grind up the amount you're going to use each time. Mm-hmm. Now, also, you can stir in with a spoon 2 or 3 tablespoons of an organic low-fat milk for a creamier mixture. So if you find out that you've mixed it and it's kind of a gooey, you can take 2 or 3 tablespoons of that milk and put it in there. And then it can be mixed by hand after the initial blending. Don't put that back in the blender. Just mix it in by hand to get it how you want it. And then the mixture can be flavored differently every day by adding nuts, preferably organic, such as pecans or almonds or walnuts. Don't use peanuts, okay? Peanuts are legumes. They're not good for you. You can use banana. You can use organic cocoa. You can use organic shredded coconut, pineapple, fresh, blueberries, raspberries, cinnamon, or freshly squeezed fruit juice. You can use that in there if you did it yourself with your juicer. Don't be opening up a can of concentrate out of the refrigerator with all the sugar in it and putting it in that. Don't do that.
That's cheating.
Yeah, really. It's usually best to place the fruit on top of the completed mixture and then mix it in with a spoon. And try your best to obtain organic fruit when possible. And many times this can be found frozen in the freezer section of the stores when it's not in season. Also, watch out on raspberries. Raspberries hold a lot of toxins from the insecticides that's sprayed out there. And unless it's for sure that it's organic, I'd probably leave those raspberries alone. But if they're organic, you shouldn't have any problem. Now, Dr. Budwig pointed out that people who are suffering from a chronic or terminal disease should work themselves up to consuming 4 to 8 tablespoons of the oil daily. So an example would be if you're at 4 tablespoons of that oil, you would be at 8 tablespoons of the cottage cheese. If you're working yourself to the higher limits of 8 tablespoons of the oil, you're at 16 tablespoons of the cottage cheese. Now, usually, Anthony, the higher limits, the 6 to 8 tablespoons, were for people with cancer. But I know of people with other chronic or terminal conditions, such as diabetes, scleroderma, and some others, which I mentioned earlier, that have done very well at these upper limits. But don't start up there. Your body cannot handle that. And she also stated that people with liver or pancreatic cancer or gallbladder cancer may have to work up very slowly with the oil and possibly only start with 1 teaspoon at a time, giving the body time to adjust. Now, I want to reemphasize this. You've got some very sick people out there with cancer that are on their deathbed, and you want to start with maybe just a teaspoon of that oil. That may be all that they can handle. You may have to go to a half a teaspoon and then gently work it up with them until you can to get to the higher levels. It may take you some time. And but Dr. Budwig pointed out that cancer patients, once starting the protocol and then getting it under control, must continue with a maintenance dose to prevent reoccurrence. Now, I want to reemphasize this also here, because I've seen people go on that Budwig protocol and do very well for a long period of time, and then they'll stop, and that cancer will come back on them like a forest fire, and you don't have time to stop it. So you don't want to cut off the electron-rich fats to the body. It needs those electron-rich unsaturated fats to bring your new cells in firing strong, and if you have tumors in there, to get it to break up and dissolve and for the cells to mature on out. So please, you want to do a maintenance dose, and you're probably going to want to stay on that maintenance dose forever. And the maintenance dose is 1 tablespoon of the oil per 100 pounds of body weight. So if you're like myself, I'm 200 pounds, so it would require a maintenance dose of 2 tablespoons of the oil per day to 4 tablespoons of the cottage cheese. Now, the Budwig diet takes time to work. And in the event of cancer or tumors, it may take 3 to 6 months to see results. Many other health issues, if you're using it for any of the other things that we've talked about, may respond much faster. Diabetes responds pretty fast to this oil. So, and there's many others there that do also. Another thing, a note of caution in regards to the Budwig protocol. Dr. Budwig did not include drugs or supplements in her protocol guidelines. Now, in her book, in her 1999, in her book, she spoke against them and said that some patients wean off of the drugs slowly under a doctor's care. Always consult your doctor in these matters. Flaxseed oil or flax oil is known to thin the blood a little bit, so be careful about using blood-thinning drugs, including aspirin. You may have to adjust them down a little bit once you start eating that. But again, that's a live food, and helps fire every cell in your body, so always adjust your drugs to your food. It would be my opinion. But again, that's up to your doctor, not me. I'm just passing the information of what Dr. Budwig said here, to just be careful. Some supplements, especially high amounts of man-made antioxidants, can seriously interfere with how well the diet works, such as some drugs and treatments such as chemo and radiation, cortisones, hormones, and painkillers. I'd be careful with those hormone shots. I know that Dr. Budwig did not like the use of hormones when you were using the Budwig diet, so I'd be very careful about that if I were a person that had that issue. And of course, chemotherapy and radiation, the person's going to have to figure that one out themselves. Dr. Budwig also warned against the dangers of oxygen therapy for the cancer patient. And she said that the cells are not ready to absorb the oxygen, but are healed through diet. So someone trying oxygen therapy of some sort, trying to force oxygen into those cells when they're not ready, well, they're not ready because the electron-rich fats aren't there. You haven't got the voltage back up high enough so the cells are firing properly. Mm-hmm. And when you get that fat in there in the form of that cottage cheese and flax oil, start eating it, it brings the electrical charge back up in the cell. It might be down there minus 20, then it goes minus 30, minus 40, minus 50, and you're getting oxygen back into the cells the proper way. And so she was very much against that oxygen therapy. There's also a very good YouTube video which actually shows how to make the flax oil and cottage cheese mixture correctly. And you can simply go into www.budwigvideos.com. Again, budwigvideos.com. And I'll spell that out for some that may have an issue with that. Budwig, B-U-D-W-I-G, videos, V like Victor, I-D-E-O-S.com. And then when starting the protocol, you'd not want to make such a large amount at first as shown in this video. So watch it when you get in there and you watch Sandra Olson making that cottage cheese and flaxseed oil, because she uses quite a bit in that, and a person would not want to start like that, even though she's showing you how to do it and the proper way to do it. And you really need to look at that video. That lady is super sharp, and I have the utmost respect for Sandra Olson. So watch it, but just remember, start slow and work your way up. Now, if you're going to use part or all of the Budwig protocol, I would recommend that you join the Flax Oil Chat group. They have more information on the Budwig protocol than any group in the entire world. And to see their files, and they've got a lot of files in there with a lot of information, you must join the group. And to join the Flaxseed Oil Chat group, all you have to do is send them a blank email to flaxseedoil2, the number 2, hyphen subscribe, SUBSCRIBE, at yahoogroups.com. And again, flaxseed oil and the number 2 hyphen subscribe at yahoogroups.com. And then you'll be able to join that group and have live conversations with them, and also look at their files.
Now, Mike, what would somebody do if they were allergic or lactose intolerant with milk or dairy products?
Anthony, this can be a problem. If you're lactose intolerant, you may want to try the following. Since commercial milk is pasteurized, beneficial bacteria and enzymes in the milk and dairy products are destroyed. Mm-hmm. Now, this has led to a number of people having difficulty in tolerating this quark or cottage cheese. Quark in Germany, cottage cheese in the United States. Now, dairy is an important component of Dr. Budwig's oil protein diet. And because good substitutes are hard to find, it's worthwhile for those who are lactose intolerant to try different ways of tolerating this dairy. Now, also, I think it's important here that many people that are lactose intolerant will find that they're able to consume the combination of the flax oil and the cottage cheese because there is a chemical reaction which takes place between the two, which actually changes the chemical makeup. And these people which were lactose intolerant can now consume this combination, but not always. Some other particular possibilities, use raw milk and raw milk products if you can get them. Use goat milk instead of cow's milk products. You could take the enzyme lactase with the Quirk or cottage cheese. You could also try Nancy's cottage cheese, which is made with lactic cultures. And for more information on her product, you can go to the website nancysyogurt.com. Nancy's NancySYogurt.com. You could make your own yogurt quirk from the recipe in the food section of the Flaxseed Oil chat group, or you can make kefir quirk, straining kefir to get a cream cheese consistency, and that's also in the Flaxseed Oil chat group's files. Now, there is a member by the name of Cheryl Toit. She's working over in South Africa, a brilliant lady who's worked with this protocol with AIDS patients over there, as well as cancer. And she sent a message to the group about kefir. And the message number, if you want to look it up, is 29710. And she said that kefir cottage cheese, or Quirk, is most certainly our solution for the lactose intolerant people. She said it works like a charm. And in the Flaxseed Oil chat group files, there are recipes for making this kefir. Now, if one doesn't wish to make kefir, sometimes you can purchase it in some health food stores in the refrigerated section. You want to try to get the organic kefir cottage cheese, as I mentioned a minute ago, or you may have to make it. That could be a tough one there. Organic kefir now also comes in a liquid, and the oil may be stirred into the kefir and consumed. Now, I want to mention this here. This would be the last of my choices to do, as I don't believe it works as well as the cottage cheese or as well as the kefir cottage cheese. So this liquid organic kefir that I'm talking about would be like a liquid yogurt, like a liquid yogurt that you actually drink. But I just don't believe, I've used it, and I just don't believe it breaks down that oil as well as a kefir cottage cheese would be for somebody who's lactose intolerant. But if somebody just flat can't stand cottage cheese and they're not going to do it, then you need to cut to the kefir, because the kefir is organic and they do have some different flavors, and it's better to get some than it is to get none. Mm-hmm. So just make sure that when you put the oil into the kefir, you could use like 6 ounces of kefir with maybe 2 tablespoons of the oil. Put your immersion blender down in there and just kind of whip it together so that oil's not showing before you consume it. Now, in the case of a person with a feeding tube, this is a difficult one. And one can use an immersion blender, again, set on a low speed, to mix that flax oil into the organic liquid kefir. That's probably one of the ways that you'd be able to do a feeding tube. Just like I said, maybe 6 ounces, put the oil into it, blend it together. If there's any of that oil floating, put a little bit more kefir in it, and then you can put that down the feeding tube. That's a very difficult issue there. Mm-hmm. You may have to play with that mixture to get the desired results. There's probably another way that it could be done. I don't like mentioning it like this, but I think because of feeding tubes, I'd want every benefit that I could possibly have, and I'd want somebody to give me the information. So you could take the cottage cheese and the oil, blend it together, the flax oil, blend it together, and then add, once it's blended together and there's no oil floating, then you could take that 2% low-fat milk and put enough into it and put it in that blender too, and blend that together gently on low until you got it thin enough that you could put it down through that feeding tube, and that might be another option there. So feeding tubes are a problem. I know all about it. Another interesting note from Dr. Budwig that I thought was really important when she talked about the condition of the cancer patient's blood prior to starting her protocol. And Dr. Budwig noted that prior to administering her protocol, she had observed blood analysis of seriously ill cancer patients, which when she looked at that blood, it showed a strange greenish yellow substance in the blood, a substance in the place of the healthy red oxygen-carrying hemoglobin. And she found that their blood, without exception, was deficient in substances called phosphatides and lipoproteins. And she also found that most people have blood that's 80% deficient in omega-3 oils. So again, Anthony, if you look at that and you think of the cookies and the cakes and the pies, look at the oil they've been made with. And that's why these people are 80% deficient in these omega-3 oils. Wow. So if you get the flax oil back into you, get some fish oils back into you, basically you got to grease yourself with this oil, the good oil. Now, Dr. Budwig found out that cancer patients' blood, after 3 months of using her protocol, returned to a bright red, and that the tumors began disappearing, and there was no more of that strange greenish, yellowish substance. And she said symptoms of cancer, liver dysfunction, and diabetes many times were completely alleviated, or a person was well on their way health-wise. But again, everybody's different, and you just have to see how it's going to work for you. There's no guarantees about any of this. You just have to do the best that you can, and hopefully you get a blessing from God on this.